Okay, so we're gonna convene the land bank meeting on April 17th here on Orcas. And thanks everybody for showing up. We're gonna start right away with public comment. So if anybody has any public comments, this is not about the hunting. Hunting comments will come later. So anybody, just general comments.
Could you make it a little bit louder?
Oh,
Some of us back here
Oh.
can't.
that's tricky for me. Okay, so we're opening it up for general public comments and we're gonna do the hunting comments later. Is that better? Okay, we have one comment. So please say your name and,
My name's Bobby and I'm here, with a number of different hats on today. And I want to thank you, first of all, for having an in-person meeting. It's refreshing. I was sharing with Tim that I'm on the Clean Water Advisory Committee and we've yet to have an in-person meeting and it's a little difficult. So anyways, for people like me. First and foremost, I'm here just trying to rekindle and maintain the fire burning and the transaction between Orcas Park and Rec and the land bank and the transaction in that real estate. And ideally we get an update on that today, but maybe not. And hopefully that can happen in the near future. It's something that's been going on for a long time. The other comment that I have and query is in the Clean Water Advisory Committee, there's been a lot of discussion over the years relative to Cascade Creek. And it's our understanding that there's been a grant that I believe the land bank has been shepherding relative to purchase of water rights. And it sounds like that may have gone away. And so any updates on that would be greatly appreciated as well. Thank you.
thank you. Any other general comments? Okay, so we're gonna move on to approving the March 20th meeting minutes.
Why do you look at me? Just one thing on page 3 on the Demetric Conservation Trail easement. There's a line saying they will also donate a trail easement. The first one the land bank will have received. I think we have other trail easements.
Did we?
We do. Okay, so maybe first one on Lopez, first one,
We'll talk to the.
Yeah.
The boss.
Yeah, we'll
figure
get
that
it straightened
out.
out. Okay,
Thank you.
and that was it. The
Rob,
rest of it looked good.
any other comments? Okay, okay, so hearing no other comments, oh, there's Mary. They're approved and we will move on to Chair and Commissioners reports.
I'll go for that. Been a lot of meetings this spring, as probably everybody's noticed. The terrestrial managers group, that was, oh, sorry, my voice is very soft too. The terrestrial managers group met, that was a very good couple of days of meetings. There was a climate convergence meeting outlining the possible changes to the comprehensive plan. Right, was a climate action plan, the CAP. And there was, of course, a meeting about hunting here on Orcas. So it's been a busy month.
I can go. Hi, and I haven't met many of you here. My name is Amy Trainer. I'm a land bank commissioner from San Juan Island. So thank you all for being here this morning. Some of you, like Bob, I recognized from when I was here 20 years ago in my wearing the hat as Friends of the San Juan. Now I work for the Swinomish tribe, and I'm really honored to be part of the land bank. And in that capacity, we've helped form a tribal subcommittee. We're trying to sort of strengthen connections and have a better sort of policy and kind of more steady engagement with our Native nations here in the Northwest. So I've worked with Chris and Lincoln on that here in the recent months. So anyway, nice to see you all. Good morning.
I'll go. I just wanted to say I also attended the terrestrial managers meeting, and I wanted to thank Erin Halcombe. She did a wonderful job, and Lincoln, helping set that up. It's a great opportunity to really get to know what other public land managers and entities out here in the islands are doing, so it was really wonderful. And I wanted to thank Amy and Peggy for being on that tribal subcommittee, because I think it is a really important aspect of what we do, and getting it right is critical, so they're both really awesome at that. And I also attended the hunting meeting here, which is another issue that I think I'm looking forward to hearing everybody talk about there today.
Yeah, I'm glad that, we were able to move the meeting to Orcas. I think the timing was perfect. And, thank those of you who also came to the other meeting that we had about the hunting. I'm Anne Marie Shanks. I live in Deer Harbor. And, I just think that the publicity and everything that the team has done to get the word out is really great. Thank you.
Mary, do you want to make any comments?
Marilyn's on.
No. Okay, well then,
Marilyn's on.
oh, and Marilyn's on. Where?
Next to the.
Good morning. Sorry I can't be there in person. I also got to attend the terrestrial managers workshop, which was really interesting for me, very eye-opening. And unfortunately, I'm out of the area right now, so I'm not there in person. But good morning anyway.
Okay. And then I'll just follow up with an introduction of myself. I'm Peggy Bill. I am from Lopez, and it's always good to come to Orcas. So yeah, it's been a busy month and it will continue. There's lots of really interesting things happening. So onward. Okay. Is that good? Okay, thank you, Tanya. Okay, stewardship reports.
So this is the part of the meeting, sorry, I'm Lincoln Borman, Land Bank Director. This is the part of the meeting that we're gonna talk about, the deer hunting proposal. And so our thought is that we'd start with a summary, from Aaron and Peter, or Aaron or Peter, about what's happened, how we've got to this point. So we'll take a little bit of time just to outline that, and then we're gonna open it for public comment. Everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. If you want to share, if you don't want to speak, you want to share your time with someone else, that's also possible. We will be timing. The commission's not going to make a decision today. They're just here to listen to what you all have to say. So we're gonna have that until, 9:45 basically. And then we'll have a commission discussion so they can kind of talk through what they've heard. And we'll take a break. We will come back to this issue at the next meeting for the commission to make a decision. That meeting is going to be on San Juan, but we do have a remote option for it, so people will be able to tune in. So.
Okay, well, I'm Erin Halcomb. Nice to see many of you again and meet some new faces. Peter and I have been working closely on this proposal for a couple of years with our partners, DFW and Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. We brought it to the public last month, March 23rd, and this is just another step in the process for us to listen to the community about concerns, comments, thoughts around this proposal. So where we're at now is we've had roughly 65 individuals write in comments. At the meeting last month, we had 49 attendees sign up on Zoom and probably another 20 or 25 in the room. And so we're glad to be able to be reaching out to the public. It seems quite challenging to figure out how people get their news, and lovely this morning hearing that someone heard it in the post office just yesterday. So we are really doing our best to respond to a lot of questions, a lot of comments, and we've been working to supply people with information about the proposal, and we have quite a bit more of that to do, which is nice because we have time. We're not trying to, force anything. This is all just part of a process to listen to the community. And Peter, you have anything like that?
Yeah, I think, as Aaron mentioned, it's been challenging for us to get out to the public what it is that we're proposing. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
misunderstanding about what is being proposed. We can do some clarification on that today. But, the views vary widely in the community, from very positive to very negative, from, concerns about safety of neighbors or safety of hikers to concerns about, whether this will have a meaningful impact on the deer population or, just noise in the distance. So, we're hearing all this and, taking it all into consideration. It's important to note that this is not the solution. This is an incremental, proposed shift in management. It was considered when the land bank first purchased Turtleback with the Preservation Trust. The decision at the time was to not do it, but, we've learned a lot about, the impact of deer on the island ecology. And so, we proposed in the revision to the management plan several years ago to consider hunting. That went out for public comment. We got some comments at that point for and against the idea. But we said we would come out and talk to the community. At that time, we did the same thing with the North Shore Management Plan when we wrote that. We included the potential for hunting and also noted that we would come to the community. So this is that process, and this has elements of ecological benefits. It has elements of acknowledging that hunters are part of our community. It acknowledges the tribal interest in accessing these lands. But it is not the be all end all. And if you step back from it, I think it's a fairly modest approach, but that's another perspective. But I think I'll sit there and.
Yeah, we also have, so for all the written comments, we've been putting them into a spreadsheet. And then, we have a little bit of data. It's quite coarse in terms of how people are feeling, and then also what they're, we've coded it for themes, whether it's ecology, public safety. So those are the themes up above.
Are those the only two things?
No, ma'am. We have a wide variety, and we'll be able to share. We wanted the public comment period to close, and then we'll send this to everyone, the results. So, this is just to date, and I'm looking for in terms of the pie graph, for people weighing in, yes, pro, con, and then it's quite mixed. Some of the comments have a little bit of both, or they're a little more challenging to decipher, where they'll outline for hunting at North Shore, but be silent about Turtleback. We're not quite sure how to interpret that, and we'll be working to get more clarity over the month ahead. And then going down, please, is you can see the top 2 or 3 themes. Ecology, safety is our highest. A lot of people worried about safety of hikers, and supporting tribal hunting also weighed in. But we'll have more conclusive results as best we can. And I think with that, I can share this with you for anyone that's, yeah.
You have a printed.
Or I could email it, yeah. So I think that's probably our time, and now we're just really looking forward to listening more from you and to our commission for guidance and thoughts.
Peter, did you want to add something?
No, I was thinking about just going up and pointing out what those themes were, but people online can be able to.
Because I can't read
Or
this.
just to read it out,
Yes.
Okay.
so we know what the
Sure.
themes are.
So this one is ecology. So, concerns about the impacts of deer on ecology generally. This is assertions that the deer population is very low. This is concerns about, peace of, the piece of a preserve and also some concerns about killing of animals, safety, opposition to exclusive tribal hunting. So some of these are, one comment really based on the number here, support for tribal hunting and then public perception concerns. And maybe you could go to the pie chart. Okay, so the blue, dark blue is con, the orange is neutral, the green is pro, and the light blue is mixed. So, and that, was roughly 50-50 or so.
That's where we are now.
It's helpful
Yeah,
to see that.
thank you.
So. Yeah, so I'm gonna open it up for public comment. I'm gonna ask that people who have not had a chance to write a letter or speak out already might wanna go first. We're gonna limit it to 3 minutes. Tanya's gonna keep track, and if you don't abide by her rules, you will be in trouble.
I've got a twinkle alarm. Shouldn't be too offensive.
There we go. So we'll start with anybody who hasn't made any comments yet, and then we'll move into anybody else who wants to make any comments. And we look forward to hearing from her. So, yes, I see. Okay, Julia. Okay. Oh, you're muted. There you
Hi,
go.
good morning. How about now?
That's good.
Yeah, my name is Julia Slater. I'm a crew member of the Islands Conservation Corps. We're a group of restoration technicians and ecological restoration specialists working across the islands, doing all types of habitat work for riparian and creekside projects and understory projects. And I want to share the past 2 weeks, my job has been carrying rebar and installing plant protectors to protect the plants that we put so much love and care and time and energy and money into getting established. It's a reality of a lot of folks doing habitat restoration work that deer overpopulation is hurting plant regeneration, it's hurting biodiversity, it's hurting ecology, and opening up intentional, carefully thought through, and safe options for hunting is imperative for the ecology of the islands. And so speaking to that piece, and then also speaking to the tribal access, the land bank and other public agencies have a duty to open up access pathways for tribes to honor harvest rights and treaty rights, and also it's just the right thing to do. We're on Coast Salish ancestral land, so providing those access pathways for tribes is vitally important, and I hope that this is part of a much larger process of reopening those pathways for folks whose homelands we're on. So just wanted to express support from the ecological side of things on behalf of the plants that are just trying their best to exist, and also opening pathways for tribal access. And again, Julia Slater with the Islands Conservation Corps.
I'll just ask for folks to speak as loud as they possibly can for everyone's benefit.
Okay. Thank you, Julia. Sandy.
Let me get off of mute first. Okay, Sandy Taylor. And first, Julia, thank you very much for all the help planting and setting up our place. This is a question for Peter and Lincoln. What can be done to ensure tribal access on land that is sold to the land bank?
Do we want to take that time right now? Go for it.
We're working on thanks for the question, Sandy. We're working on a policy to move in that direction in a variety of ways. So I think what we've been going for really is just increasing our interaction with tribes on everything that we do. So that's from management plans to actual management strategies to acquisition strategy. Whatever we can engage with the tribes on, we're interested in doing that. And so we're developing this policy to kind of figure out how we do that. We have to work within the county's tribal engagement framework. So whatever we do is nested within that. But it's just basically continuing the conversation with tribes and continuing to increase our impact with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else online? Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move out into folks that are here. So start out and state your name and
Yeah. Hey, my name is Kai Sage, and I'd like to advocate for bow hunting and hunting of all kinds on Orcas Island on behalf of my own family and our Coast Salish neighbors. As the climate crisis progresses, I personally cannot ethically support the commercial meat and livestock industry. And for my whole life, island venison is probably the only meat that I feel comfortable eating, and it's a very important, protein sustenance for my diet. And it's been providing my family sustenance for more than 40 years on this island. Currently, Kilbrew Lake is the only open access deer hunting on the island. But I've seen those trails become more frequently flooded and inaccessible due to, increasing beaver populations. And then I'd also like to mention the 1855 Treaty of Point Elliott that grants our local tribal nations access to their traditional hunting and fishing grounds. And a reminder that this is a treaty that's legally binding between the United States of America and individual sovereign nations. And as residents and visitors on this land, I believe that we all hold a very sacred obligation to honor these treaty rights. I believe that the Turtleback and North Shore preserves have the opportunity to support sustainable meat consumption, return tribal access to their hunting grounds, and strengthen the cross-cultural bond between our communities.
thank you. Well put. Anybody else?
I hope you don't mind if I stand up, but I'm too short for you to see me. So I'm Jean Henningsen. I fully support the idea of controlled deer hunting on both Turtleback and North Shore preserves as a means for managing the North Shore preserve, for managing a healthy deer population on Orcas in order to support the overall sustainable biodiversity of all the island's other plants and animal populations, and for upholding the Treaty of Point Elliott. And I hope that Land Bank, I only get the sounder, and so that's where my name and the Orcasonian, because I'm old fashioned in terms of what I read. So I hope that more publicity will happen in response to everything during this time that we have. I've observed that there is a great deal of misinformation and feelings of fear among many Islanders because they have never had any experience with any kind of gun or responsible hunting practices. Therefore, I think it would behoove the Land Bank to bring the fear factor into the open. I like what the representative from the tribes, I'm sorry I didn't get his name, I watched the video, which was very informative, of the meeting that I was unable to attend on March 23rd. But he said at the end, in answer to Jeff Otis's experience with the bullet coming through your house, which was certainly terrifying, and you live near Turtleback, but to paraphrase what he said, there is a history of pain from both sides, from accidents, from hunters who are irresponsible, and from broken trees, which is very sad. But he reminded us that this proposal is simply an opportunity to try to come together now in being good students, good stewards of nature for our shared land and our shared future generations. I would add, as one of the representatives of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife at that meeting said also, that this is an educational opportunity for people to learn about the effort and expense of hunter safety and training and licensing that will be required, just as is required for obtaining a driver's license. That same man, who was a tall man, who was standing most of the time.
Tina. Well, Brandon, he's on Zoom.
Oh, it's Brandon. Okay, thank you. That this is an opportunity for Fish and Wildlife staff to educate our islanders about the destructive effect that deer overpopulation has on all the rest of nature on Orcas that we love. I would like to have more hands-on clarification to describe how the boundaries and trails are set. At the meeting, you walked through those things. It was very good, but what I mean by hands-on is I had to see what you're talking about. And I guess it was Brandon going on the trails and marking things and looking at the neighbors. And also that 100 feet of safety, that has to be described, and people with no experience have no idea what that means in relation to the various weapons.
Jean, we had our 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. But I did see you emailed the comment as well, and that will definitely get passed around. Thank you so much.
Are you Tanya?
I am Tanya.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Dick Banger, and my wife Dawn's with me. We own the property adjacent to the land bank property on the North Shore. We've owned it since 1962. Couple of things I want to clarify in addition to the comments I've already submitted. Number one, before the virus hit the deer, we would get anywhere from 10 to 15 deer on our property almost every evening. We have a pond, the pond attracts the deer. It's a beautiful situation. The most deer we've counted since the virus are 3, 2 young deer and 1 buck. I think that the land bank and the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries needs to do an audit of that 58 acres to try to figure out how many deer actually are there. Because I think there's a misnomer here that we've got deer running all over the place. That's not the case. I can attest to that. Second of all, the McLaughlin property, which is adjacent to us and adjacent to the land bank, has an easement that runs right through the middle of the preserve. That's how they get to their property. If you have hunters out there shooting and they're trying to go across the property, that's going to be a real serious situation. Finally, in my comments, I've asked that if you are going to approve hunting, the adjacent landowners should be told the names and the phone numbers of the hunters that are on the property and when they're going to be there. So that if we have an issue, we can either get a hold of them or if necessary, get a hold of the sheriff. Again, we are absolutely against hunting on that 58 acres. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was your name again?
Dick Banger, B-A-N-G-E-R-T.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Otis. First I wanted to say I really appreciate the land bank. You know, I always wear my land bank hat.
A little bit louder.
And I'm so glad we do have the land bank. And I supported you and I supported the Preservation Trust throughout the years. And I think you're all doing a great job, but I'm very much against this proposal for hunting on turtleback, primarily on turtleback. From my perspective, one is because I butted and I've had bullet goats to my house in the past for my hunter. So that's a very frightening thing for me. Also, when I first learned about it, I mentioned it, have you heard about the proposal for hunting on turtleback? And people were just not aware of that. So to get the word out, we started a petition. And the petition reads, it's a petition to maintain the ban on hunting on Turtleback Mountain Preserve. Because right now there's a ban, hunting is not allowed on Turtleback. And then it says in 2008, and that's referring to the management plan, Turtleback Preserve was established with a specific intent of being a protected sanctuary, and this is quotes from the land bank side, refuge for wildlife and a haven for those who wander the trails through the mosaic of forests, wetlands, and open meadows, end quote, as noted in the land bank website. The land bank proposal to introduce hunting to the preserve disregards that history, compromises the trust of over 2,000 people, 2,000 community members who contributed toward the purchase of Turtleback, and would put the safety of recreational users at risk while destroying the peaceful, quiet setting of the preserve. And that's a very important thing to me. The preserve, when I walk it, just has this, it's a beautiful sanctuary, and bringing the sound of guns and hunting into it completely changes that sense of place for me. That's a really big one for me and a lot of people. So we had a no written comments be submitted to the land bank by the 20th. Then it says, we, the undersigned, petition the land bank commissioners to honor the original dedicated purpose of the Turtleback Preserve as a sanctuary for communing with nature by maintaining a ban on hunting, ensuring that the preserve remains a peaceful, safe, and quiet place for hikers and wildlife. As of last night, we had 165 signers on the petition. As of this morning, we have 172 signers on the petition. Did I give these copies to you? These are the originals. Maybe you want photocopies. How would you like this?
I'll follow up with you after the meeting.
Okay.
to Figure out.
Should I just hold on to it right now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity.
You got a hand up online, Peggy.
Okay. Can we hear from you online? CJ.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm on the ferry this afternoon. I wasn't able to make it in person. I'll be submitting a comment in writing as well, but I wanted to try to get in on this Zoom and give some words in person to my beliefs. And I think hunting is very important for our island community in terms of spiritual practice, self-sufficiency, and community resiliency. And not only is it recreation, but it's food harvesting. And while I do believe that Turtleback is a special sanctuary of place, I've studied the topography of the designated sections. And as a lifelong hunter, I believe that these sections are far enough away from trail spaces where it could be done safely for both archery and modern firearm hunting. And I think that in a time when most land is private in our community, that it's crucial to provide public spaces for people to harvest their own meat, and as well as implementing deer reduction in our community. As a landscaper and as somebody who has background in conservation work, I've seen severe predation of native plants in all ecosystems from the deer population. And unlike mainland-based deer, our island deer range in reaches well across most of the island because of the scarcity and selectivity of what they are choosing to eat. And because of that, I believe that the population needs to be reduced. And I think hunting is a great way to do that. Instead of waiting for WDFW to use taxpayer money to hire another organization to do that, I think it's a great stream of revenue for the state and for the county to be able to have people pay to remove these deer instead of paying to have our problem taken care of. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm Tracy Donat. I'm a full-time resident here on Orcas. And I'm here to ask the land bank to reject the proposal for the change in the land use of two of their preserves to allow hunting. While I understand hunting can be an effective wildlife management tool, Unfortunately, in this application, it will not have any great impact. I can say this with certainty, as this was communicated very clearly in the meeting on March 23rd. The representative, I think maybe it was Peter, I know because I watched on Zoom, said allowing hunting in these areas really won't impact the deer situation on orcas, and therefore it won't really impact the ecosystems. He himself called it, quote, a drop in the bucket. He also was unable to give any accurate data on current deer population on these parcels, or what the goal as far as population would be. This proposal does not appear to be researched or science-based, nor to have any real measures for success or failure, and therefore I feel it is ill-considered. Bringing hunting onto these peaceful preserves would not in any way solve ecosystem issues on orcas. And the sacrifice to the community who funds these preserves would be great. These should remain as they were intended and sold to the public, as sanctuaries for peaceful and safe enjoyment. Safety is of incredible concern, especially in light of the recent shooting death on Lopez. A man was killed by a stray pellet meant for a deer from 93 yards. This proposal calls for hunters to come as close to 100 feet from private property and public walking trails. What safety measures were used to come up with that number? At this same meeting, important questions about enforcement and compliance were asked. Concerns about party size being confirmed, alcohol, boundaries observed. No one really had an answer. The best they could come up with was, quote, yet to be determined, but we're going to do our best. This only reinforces my understanding that this plan is ill-advised, is not safe, and really doesn't have an environmental benefit on orcas. I formed this opinion by hearing from the experts and planners who are in charge. I listened carefully to what they were saying. So if there's really not much benefit to conservation, and it's not been thought through from a public safety perspective, how in good conscience can you move this plan forward? And in closing, because it's come up, the subject of treaty rights and indigenous rights. So if that's the conversation, let's have that conversation. Why don't you present that proposal? Don't conflate it with conservation or have non-indigenous people piggyback on those rights that aren't theirs. Present that proposal specific to treaty rights, and I, for one, would view this from a completely different lens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some hands.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Tracy was right about a lot of things there.
Can you say your name?
Toby Cooper,
Thank you.
Rosario. Orcas. So I'd like to bring in a perspective that really hasn't been brought up yet, as far as I know, in this conversation. And that is namely that there's kind of two camps in terms of the analysis of the situation to look at, to consider. Should I be talking to you guys? If you ask a zoologist to look at Orcas Island and say, do we have a deer problem, or is it, what's the deer situation here? The zoologist is going to say that you're going to have a whole finding, basically, from someone who's looking at it from a pure science perspective. They're going to note that deer on orcas are smaller and more numerous, more in terms of density than on the mainland, and that is a phenomenon known to science as insular or island dwarfism. So you expect, if you're a zoologist, you expect deer to be more numerous on the island. Furthermore, they're going to say they are predator limited. Well, predator limited, if you count virus as predator. They're also going to note that there never were predators that mammalian predators on these islands. Orcas Island is 54 square miles. That would be the territory of a single mountain lion, dominant male mountain lion. 50 square miles is their minimum. So you can have one lion on Orcas Island. So there was never predator limitation coming from, what we know. The wolves were known as marine wolves. Their primary diet was tide pool life and harbor seals, and bear. Deer is a negligible part of bear diet. So the whole notion of eliminating predators is, specious and not really part of the thing. If I hear that bell, I'm gonna ask for just a little more time.
You're at 50 seconds right now.
It has a way of evaporating. So this notion of deer being smaller and so forth is this phenomenon is noted around islands all around the world. In the continental US, there's really Orcas Island or the San Juan County and some of the Gulf Islands up here. The Florida Keys, which has a relatively miniature white-tailed deer, and Astig Island that has Sika deer that were introduced from Japan, that in the 100 years or so they've been there, they've gotten smaller too. And that's because the evolutionary theory there is that it favors you to be big if you're in
Excuse me.
habitat with, if you're in a habitat with lions, because you're harder to bring down. So if you're in a habitat without lions, it favors you to be small, to grow up sooner and have babies that much sooner. So that's called evolution. So ask a wildlife manager the same question and you're going to get a very different answer. Okay, and that's because wildlife management is applied science. And applied science has to have a client. And you, think of a lawyer, meaning someone comes out of law school, they hang up their shingle, ask that lawyer, are you going to argue for the prosecution or the defense? What's he going to say? Depends on the client. So it is with wildlife managers. They need a client. WDFW's client is the hunting community. They pay the bills. That's what they say. They proudly say that. The hunting community says, yeah, we pay the bills. The department is glad to recognize that. That's the way it is. Sorry.
In fairness to everybody else, I want you to wrap up pretty soon.
I'll give him my 3 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
Furthermore, WDFW is under a legislative mandate to maximize hunting opportunities. Okay, that's the RCW, and I can quote the number. That's their job, and they pursue that, and you know what they're gonna say before they even walk in the door. So all I'm asking from the board is that you recognize that and kind of put that through a filter of some kind. That's their inputs. You're gonna hear that from them. And the reason for bringing up the zoology, stuff is that I would like to see evidence that you're considering a broader scientific perspective in analyzing this whole thing. So what that leads me up to then is that there's a political component to this. The last 24 election, the land bank was reauthorized. There was 14,141 votes cast, 67% in favor of land bank. That's 8,800 people who voted for the land bank. But Jeff's petition and a number of comments here is telling me that if I was on this board, I would be concerned about how many votes we're losing. Also, how many are we gaining? I would note that hunting, again, I'm not trying to argue emotional thing or anything, but just on the cold facts, hunting in Washington State is about a 3%, or 3% favorable rating in terms of actual buying of licenses. It's more like 2.5%.
There's
So
30 seconds left, just so you
Okay.
know, Toby.
that's about it. So I would like to make an offer that the people that we have a conversation before this decision is made. That the people that are signing these petitions and so forth, Jeff can deal with that. I'm happy to be a part of this. I would like to, talk to Lincoln. I would like this conversation to include Jason Onchus, the noxious weed specialist for the county, and perhaps some other biologists who can explore what I might call non-lethal alternatives to solving the problem of habitat impacts from the deer. And that we look at something like that. And if it comes to some kind of, like, whether it's, controlled burning or something that would cost money, that, I would volunteer to head up a committee to raise money to contribute to that, to the trust and the land. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've got Zoe online.
Okay, Zoe.
Hello. I'd like to start off with, my name is Zoe Smith. I'm a supervisor for the Island Conservation Corps. And speaking directly to what was just said, I don't think that there is a silver bullet for this solution. Specifically, deer herbivory is an issue across all the islands. It's been seen pretty consistently, and been very much so proven by the fencing that the land bank has been doing over the last 15 years to show what can grow in different ecosystems if you do reduce deer access to those zones. It would be lovely to be able to have hunting and have somebody raise money to help create solutions that aren't just hunting. I mean, this is a problem that's going to persist, and we need to all be working together to create many solutions to that one problem. Speaking for the plants and the amount of work that we do to protect them, we're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into deer protection every single few years. And for that to be even just a little less money and create food for this community is super important. And on the tribal rights, why do we have to wait for there to be a legal decision to be giving tribes rights for access to their usual and accustomed places? This is our treaty to be implementing, and we need to be valuing that and creating solutions for them rather than making them jump through hoops. And I challenge everyone on the board for that to be a large priority moving forward with every single management plan that's being written. This is super important, and public land should be accessed for them, whether that's harvesting, whether that's hunting, whether that's ceremony. It's a very, very important piece of being on stolen land. And hunting is a big piece of that. And I think that working together, we can create solutions. But again, that is all working together, and accepting that everyone has different opinions and coming into one room and having these conversations. So I thank you for opening up this space for us to be talking and having these uncomfortable tensions with people that have different values. And this is a really important conversation for our community moving forward. Hunting isn't just the solution, it is a solution to many solutions for our ecosystems. These systems, we need something to change. The deer are truly like there's no undergrowth in so many of these places, and the amount of money that we're putting into plantings and the amount of money we're putting into restoration simply is mute if we're not dealing with the deer problem. So let's come up with many solutions together. And I think that having a committee of people to raise money for prescribed burns, great, let's do that. But the hunting can't be off the table. It's an integral piece of moving forward, especially with tribal rights. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Zoe. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. First, I'd just like to say thank you for having civil comment. I think we've lost that. And
Say your name.
Oh.
I know you got, but.
yeah, my name is Joe Gatos, and I live here on Orcas Island. Well, I love that we can discuss this as community members and have different opinions, so thank you for that. I am a wildlife veterinarian, and so I save animals' lives, and I also eat meat and hunt animals. I'm primarily now a marine wildlife veterinarian, but I spent multiple years working on deer diseases for my PhD. I studied epizootic hemorrhagic disease. I studied the spatial epidemiology, the effects of disease, the effects of the population, and implications with that with white-tailed deer. I do support the proposal for deer hunting on turtleback. I think venison is a great source of local protein that we need to acknowledge that. Also, I think that the science, as a scientist, I can tell you the science is very strong about the impacts of deer overbrowsing on the mid-level canopy and low-level canopy. And you can look at studies that have been done from the Queen Charlotte's, Haida Gwaii, into the Gulf Islands, down into the San Juan Islands, whether it's exclusion or other things like that. And if you want to have native plants at that level, it's a competition with deer. So it's a trade-off that we're talking about here. Deer are still probably rebounding from the adenovirus hemorrhagic disease outbreak, but they will come back. And I can tell you just mathematically, that's going to happen. So I think this is probably now is a good time to start implementing the program. I feel that separating hunters and non-hunters, and using non-lead ammunition, and adhering to the county's low velocity shotgun requirements, I think are all great things for safety. And I would suggest that the land bank work closely with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to preferably have some sort of a hunter harvest monitoring program, look at the age and the size of those deer, where those deer are taken. And I'd just like to point out about that's one way for us to look at the effectiveness of the program. We can also look at plants and browse lines and things like that. As has been said here before, this is not the silver bullet. This is not the only thing we need to do to balance plants and having deer. And we do have hunting in many places on the island already, but it's all on private property. And so that may be next to you, and you may not even know about that happening right now. And I do think that we could see local ecological benefits on Turtleback Mountain, and we are charged with the stewardship of that place, not just for the privacy of people that want to walk there, but for the plants and the animals that live there as well. I would like to point out one thing I thought of today is that working with the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission is very important for tribal treaty rights, but we do have some tribes like the Chinook and the Samish that do not have treaty rights, and I would encourage you to talk to those tribes directly, that fits in with the county's tribal relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
One hand up.
Brian? Okay, I'll come back.
That's the second. Okay.
Good morning, my name is Brian Weiss, Orcas Island. And I'd like to speak on behalf of hunting rights in the preserves. I can't speak as a hunter, I'm not a hunter, don't have that experience. But I'll speak from my observations as a gardener, and which honestly means that I carry stuff and dig holes for my wife. The first couple of years that we tried to have a garden on Orcas, it was devastated by deer. I was told I needed to put up a deer fence. Didn't do it, resisted it. I'm what you might call a late adapter. But the garden was absolutely devastated. So we did end up the third year putting about a quarter-mile deer fence around the property in order to have a garden. From personal observation, the deer are back. Black-tailed deer are, from what I can tell and from what I know, not really migratory. They're not far-ranging. They stay pretty local. The deer are around our place. I almost hit one the other night driving home. I see the same deer around our property outside the fence all the time, and I know they're there. So one of the things that means is that for the people who say that hunting in the two preserves isn't going to have a lot of impact on the island, that's true, but it will have impact locally in those two preserves. And that's important because the land bank has done a lot of restoration work, lots of planting in those preserves. Peter has put in thousands of new plants in the North Shore Preserve and many new trees on Turtleback too. Most of the trees are fenced around them so that they won't be browsed by the deer, so that they can grow up. And that's a lot of money and a lot of time to do that. People who know the preserves know that we have several deer exclosures on the preserves. In the enclosures where the deer are capped out, you can see a really healthy undergrowth of understory plants. It's lush. Outside, it's a completely different story. So that tells you the impact of deer browsing. They are devastating. They will eat everything but the rocks, and I'm not even sure about that. So the deer are back on Orcas anyway, and I just want to say that I think that it's important that the commission listen to local opinion and make a decision. But I also think that it's important that local folks look around and listen to the science.
Okay, and looks like we have another comment from Sandy.
Hi, thank you again. I'd like to address the treaty rights very briefly. I live on the site of Lummi Winter Village. I'd like to ask if the Treaty of 1855 applies to this question at all. And if it does, we are not giving permission or granting rights. These are rights that they did not give up in the treaty. So we don't have to give permission if the treaty applies. We don't have to give permission. They have the right, and we can ask them to accommodate us. Thank you.
Joe.
Yeah, Joe Gatos again. Sorry. I just want to touch on treaty rights for a second. So we work a lot with 19 Northwest Treaty Tribes in the area, and Sandy's right. We did not, they granted us rights to have a fishing and hunting in the area. And when we had big issue in the marine area about marine protected areas, and we said, look, we want to set aside these areas, go ahead and fish in them. And when we talked with them about that, they said, you know, you're setting us up for failure. Because if not everybody can go into an area and we're the ones going there, we immediately become the enemy. And so don't do that to us, Joe. Don't set up marine protected areas, exclude everybody else, and then let the tribes go in there, because people will not understand that, and you're setting us up to be the bad guy right away. And that was really profound to me, to understand that subtle nuance of the relationship like you talked about, that if they have some privilege that we don't have, that can put them in a very bad situation. I just wanted to comment on that from the Marines' perspective.
Okay.
Not to turn it into a conversation, which I would like to do, but couple of things. As to treaty rights, which I didn't address before, there's no question we acknowledge the 1855 treaty, but the treaty is also not amended, but it's influenced by the Bolt decision, which went to the Supreme Court, which confers or recognizes the ability of controls to be imposed. In other words, the treaty rights do not entitle rights to hunt no matter what. It still must fall within the limits that are imposed for biological or wildlife management reasons. So if the land is closed to hunting, the treaty doesn't override. It must still cooperate with, according to the Bolt decision, with the regs. As to the virus, thanks, Joe. Joe and I, you may forget about this, but we had a long conversation on a ferry right after the presentation by Ruth Milner in 2017, at which some of this, what I call fiction, was imposed. And Joe and I recognized that, in fact, the virus is a predator, and that the curve of the population, the evolution of the curve of numbers of deer goes through a rise and fall that is bounded on the upper end by the virus. Typically, and this comes from my years at the University of Michigan, so a long time ago, but typically you see kind of a sine curve of the population movements. In the case of the deer on Orcas Island, it probably looks more like Half Dome, that there's an increase and then a crash, and then an increase and then a crash. The plants, many of the plants, such as madronas, are adapted to that pattern. Madrona seedlings grow extremely fast, and it's during the crash time and the recovery time that they get going and get tall enough to be out of reach, and that's how madronas get by. There's people that think that the deer are going to end madronas, make them go extinct, but It's in fact a pattern that they get going in the crash years. And that's how they establish us to smaller herbaceous plants. I don't know if there's a conversation there. So my offer for a deeper conversation with a committee of some kind still stands. And the offer to raise money, and I'd like to see us make a deal. I'd like to see people like Joe and Brian and so forth beyond that, but that's, not in a position to dictate that, just an offer and suggestion, and I would like to see the tribal interest be reflected in that, so it's truly a, sort of a committee. Thanks.
Thank you.
One other comment.
Go for it.
Just to add on to what Toby is saying there, nature.
Jeff, do you want to just say again who you are so we can get that?
Oh, Jeff Otis.
Yeah.
So nature has a way of correcting itself. The one thing that I think is really beautiful about this, there hasn't been any hunting on turtleback for 20 years now. And in a way, I think we could look at that as an experiment, see what happens when you don't do anything. If food sources are low, deer will have fewer fawns. Food sources are high, they'll have more fawns. Population is and the population of the deer is very high. Disease comes in, lowers that population. Nature, so like Toby was saying, the virus was really the same as a predator. And I know Fish and Wildlife doesn't like that because it's not a predictable thing. They like something that's predictable. But it acts in the same way as a predator. There's natural selection. So I think we humans, we try to control nature, but we do a really bad job at it. And if we just let things be, they will work themselves out. And I think we could use turtleback as an example of that. Thank you.
Can I just do a 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Sandy Horowitz, if I do 30 seconds, it'll be unbelievable. I've never done that. And I know about deer. I'm married for 43 years and I've said a lot of yes years in 43 years. So, but what I want to mention is just a little challenge to the commissioners. And that is, it is a little bit of a controversial, sensitive, and there's so many different views. I would be a little surprised, not disappointed, I don't know what words to use, if we ended up with a 7-0 vote on either side of the issue. So I'm challenging one or two commissioners on either side of the issue not to be afraid to speak up or not to be afraid to vote not as a unanimous group. And this is, I've gone through the minutes the last 4 years. There's only a few votes. You do the annual financial statement votes, you did the 2022 votes to allow hunting, etc. So there's not a lot of votes in everything. So this is different for this commission. And I'm not saying which side to come down on, although I'd like to see what the petition said to stay in that area for my vote. So I challenge it. If I saw a 7-0 vote, there's nothing I do about it. But obviously, it shouldn't end up with the 7-0 vote. There's enough diversity here that someone's got to fall on one side or the other besides the unanimous vote. So it's kind of a little bit of a challenge. And I appreciate what you guys do as volunteers. I've read your biographies because I couldn't fall asleep last night, so that helped. It's amazing, really, this is not your first rodeo. What you all have done in your backgrounds is in this area of work. And the staff kind of upsets me. They just kind of piss me off because they're so nice. They're so kind. It's remarkable the work they've done. And that's why I hesitated to even, so this is what she has to live with. I never stop.
Let me just see if anybody else has any before I come back to you.
And Zoe.
Okay, Zoe, and I think we have, how much more time?
We're at 9:36, so 9 minutes.
Okay. Zoe?
Hello. Yeah, just wanted to say a few more things. I keep hearing come up in the room that nature has its way of, compounding and bouncing back, but I challenge that humans aren't a part of nature. And I could go into a long conversation on that, but we're not going to get into that. But I do challenge that concept of humans being separate than nature, and there's like whole wilderness theories on this. But indigenous folks have been on this land for 5, 10, 15,000 years. And to exclude them and humans from the concept of nature for this ecosystem is a colonizer mindset. And I think it's really important to note that as you're, conceptualizing these decisions and having these conversations is where's your privilege within that, and how can we be talking about, the layers of the history in this land and be implementing that from like an ecosystem need perspective. And there is a lot of science on this, and I think that it would be really lovely to have the land bank pull together all of that science and have it in a place that helps with this argument of increasing hunting on the land. And maybe using some photos for, photo evidence that show the fencing successes of these areas, because there's science behind it. And to subtract humans from this conversation is subtracting, people. So thank you.
Thank you. Erin.
I just wanted to take a second while we had time to have Brandon introduce himself. He's a partner with DFW, and Peter and I have introduced ourselves. So Brandon, do you want to just say hi and then your specific role with DFW?
You bet. Hi, everybody. Brandon Rusin. I am a private lands biologist for Region 4 at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, which means I work not just on the islands there, but primarily on the mainland. And, my role, as the name and title indicates, I primarily work on private lands to facilitate either conservation or public access. And on some cases, like this one, where there are critical circumstances to consider, or maybe anomalies or features of a property, a public piece of property that warrant additional maybe measures or controls to facilitate access. My program enters into the equation, and so my colleague Kurt License, while he has been, and before him Ruth Milner, they're the primary biologists, wildlife biologists for the area. My role is to help them work with you all to get to a point where if you decide to allow hunting on this property, that I will work with the land bank, my program will, to further develop a plan and an opportunity for the greater public to hunt on this property. However, know that this is a great conversation in my mind, because we're not just looking at opening up the ground for hunting on Turtleback Mountain, but trying to change, I guess, the mindset and the frame around hunting and perhaps public access for hunting on the islands. And so this kind of conversation, when it relates to a specific proposal, it really does pull out the important aspects of the community's opinions on hunting and the safety aspects of it, the biological impacts. And so we absolutely take all that into careful consideration. And so I know there's been some concern about the proposal that's already been in place. The program, the department is working with Aaron and the staff there to continue to kind of develop a scenario that fits for this site. So I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate the kind nickname I was given, the tall man, I think. I've been called worse, so I appreciate that. I will be on the island as regularly as I can and needed to support Aaron and the land bank, get information out, not necessarily to make an opinion or to try to persuade you guys, but to be there to offer information and insight to what my program can help provide over there, and maybe try to find some additional partners, private landowners who are interested in facilitating public access. So I'll just leave it at that for now. But I'm not necessarily going anywhere. I'll be around and a part of the conversation in the process. So thank you, Aaron, for the opportunity.
Oh, my goodness. I haven't asked, and then we're gonna have to close it up, but yes, because you have not spoken yet.
I just wanted to ask
You want
Brandon.
to say your name?
Oh, Suzanne Chamberlain. I've lived on Orcas 35 years. I wanted to ask Brandon, could you find some private lands on Orcas that the land bank could purchase? Or could you arrange with those private landowners to have the hunting there? Because we've got this one place that is really important to so many people, that is the essence of Orcas, as far as being peaceful and relating to nature and protecting the wildlife. Yes, Zoe, we want to protect the plants too. But, you know, we humans have done much more harm to the plants on this island than any deer has ever done. And now we're starving our deers to some extent because we want our pretty flowers, and a lot of them aren't native plants. They're the ones we happen to want to grow, or, you know, our vegetables, obviously. But,
Yeah, I can quickly speak to your point because it's an important clarification. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
the hunting.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Yeah, please don't misunderstand the motives or the I want to say the mission, but the purpose of the program I operate. Absolutely, with willing parties, willing landowners, and yes, our primary audience, if you want to call it that, or partners tend to are private landowners. And so yes, we do continue to try to find and facilitate access to private lands. We do not purchase property in the program that I operate. We work on cooperative agreements, so they're temporary agreements. So we won't be, the department is not at this time interested in purchasing property for these purposes, but we are absolutely interested in working with willing landowners to figure out something for their piece of property.
We're gonna have to,
9:44. Right, this will take less than a minute. I read that on San Juan, Mount Grant and Lopez Hill and Lopez, that those are successful programs that are now happening. I have heard nothing about them. Why are they successful? What's working over there? I'd like to know more information about that.
good, that's a good point. We have.
Those are very different islands than Orcas.
This isn't a comment, this is a question. The gentleman in the back, sorry, kind of threw the ball at the commissioners. And I'm just wondering, can we have not really a straw vote, but comments on how you feel about things so far?
Well, right now, we're scheduled to have a conversation amongst the commissioners. We're not gonna take a vote
No.
at this time, so I'm not sure where you're gonna get what you want right yet, but we're all working on it. So I think this has been a really helpful discussion. I really appreciate how everybody's come forward with really
Thank you.
diverse opinions and listening. Everybody's listening, and I appreciate that. So.
Thank you.
So we're gonna close the public comment period. Please know that you're also most welcome to continue to send letters to the land bank and express your opinion and continuing conversation. So right now, commissioners are gonna talk a little bit, and you're of course welcome to listen.
Is there a deadline still for the letters?
Yes,
I know it was extended from the sixth to the 20th.
August 20th, or sorry,
But
April. Wrong A month.
No, but it was extended, thank you very much, from the sixth, when people didn't even know it was happening, and they're just beginning to learn that it's happening. And so I'm suggesting you might consider extending it even further.
So it's, right now it's April 20th.
Currently, end of
So,
day, April 20th.
I would just suggest that you get the word out as fast as you can, and so we don't have to keep extending it. But certainly people are always welcome to speak up.
I'll be happy to start us off. So again, my name.
Wait, Amy, just one quick comment
Just
here.
curious where you can get bullet points on what's really being discussed, because I just came in thinking I wanted to hear a land bank meeting. I didn't know you were doing this. But I really, what's the period of time? What's the harvest? What's, there's so many things that if you came in blind, you are uninformed on what's really being discussed here.
I'd love to meet with you afterwards and have, distribute information.
We did have a prior meeting on this topic that was recorded. So it's posted on our website, right? So you can go and just, watch the presentation. That would help a lot.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna wrap up the public comment period. So now we're gonna start into the commissioners, and Amy, you have a comment.
Yeah, I mean, at first I just want to thank everybody. As the land bank commissioner, I'm an at-large position, so even though I live on San Juan, I feel like it's really nice to be here. I really appreciate everybody's time. I think, it's not insignificant to get engaged, and I know this is, really kind of up close and personal to you, and I really appreciate that. I take it to heart. I will just say where I'm coming from, and so I'm a Kansas girl. I grew up with a dad and brother who are hunters. And so I grew up eating venison, although I wish there was still shot required back then instead of allowing mud. So I think, hunting is not foreign to me. It is something that's sort of like, in my roots. Although when I became a vegetarian, my got made fun of, like, what are you doing? You've grown up to be like, this is who you are as a Kansas girl. So, I feel both sides of this. I know that I feel like we're all, or certainly I feel very privileged to live in the islands. There's nothing like walking on a preserve and having it all to yourself, right? And it's quiet and it is peaceful and you get to just hear the birds. Like, I fully love that. It is part of what makes me so thrilled to get to live here. And what makes the land bank amazing at what it does. We have amazing staff. And it really adds so much value, I feel like, to our island experience and our community. I do work for a treaty tribe, so I'm very, I love that everybody is very versed in Treaty of Point Elliott and that there's so much support for tribes and their ancestral practices on the islands. And I really appreciate your comments. Like, that's what we're talking about. Let's have a conversation about it. I have not had the ability to engage as much as I'd like on this issue. But I also, I think perhaps because I grew up in a hunting family, I personally just have kind of a discrepancy in how I view disease. I don't see it as a predator. I think if we care about animals, like the suffering that happened and seeing some of those animals and having dead, rotting carcasses all over San Juan Island, it was horrid. I mean, at every trail I went on, you just smelled them and there were these poor dead creatures that had been suffering. So I think that is very much a consideration. Yes, ideally we'd have like a natural predator and wouldn't, disease wouldn't be it. So I think I'm open to finding a way that we could address safety concerns, address the very real concerns that the community has, because I take personally I think it's very powerful when that many people have signed a petition. Like, that makes a difference. At the same time, I think we've heard from the people on the ground, like, there is an effect. We've heard from Orcas Island's
preeminent scientists, like, this has an effect. And I'm not sure we want to wait for disease and the incredible suffering that this disease inevitably will come back and will cause again, to sort of be what we rely on as our management tool. So I would ask that everybody think about, is there some middle ground here that we could have, you know, some limited amount that, you know, maybe we try it and then we're going to learn, and we're gonna maybe start small, but we're gonna do it in a way that, we ensure that the public would have the information that they need so that it could be done in a safe way. That we would do everything we could to make the public safe, certainly landowners. Cause I wanna be mindful, like, if this goes forward, and I'm not saying it will, but I guess I want you to know I'm taking all of this, really important, insightful, thoughtful comment to heart. And, but at the end of the day, I would like to find a way that we start small and we can find a way to build a program that does have a management component, because this population will rebound, and this disease is a predator. I just personally, I don't agree with that theory. I think, you know, one shot or one bow and you're helping, you know, you're helping harvest, you're helping let the exercise of treaty rights. You know, you are having, whether it's small or, you know, growing a long-term impact on the ecology. So that's kind of where I am. So I'm not a hard yes. I'm definitely not a hard no. I want to hear more. Again, I really appreciate your time today and your thoughtful comments, and I just want you to feel heard. And I do want to find a way to, you know, see if we can find a path forward that maybe not everybody's going to be happy, but in a negotiation, nobody's usually ever happy. Everybody's happy. But if we can at least make you feel heard and get you some comfort, particularly around the safety issue, then I think we will have succeeded. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. I'm Chris Gadati. I managed state parks for 38 years around the state. Most recently, I just retired from this area. I live in Moran, and I guess what I'll say is, and in full disclosure, I'm a bow hunter, so I have a little bit of experience with hunting. In the land management business, it's always really hard, you know, because we're always trying to thread the needle. You know, I ask myself, you know, as we've made decisions over time, can we do this safely? That's always the first question that we ask. And I do believe from, you know, this proposal can be done safely. As a hunter, I have probably a higher degree of comfort, you know, being out in the forest with other hunters, having done it. I think for the most part, they're very responsible people, but this proposal is 2 people at a time on a reservation system, which is going to prevent, you know, a huge influx of people on the land. It's going to be a kind of proposal where it's pretty minimal, to be honest with you. And if you're making a reservation to come hunting, you're typically going to be a responsible person. These people are licensed, they have to go through hunter safety courses. The design of the proposal, I think, means that it can be done safely. The other thing is, I'm not a wildlife biologist or a biologist, but in the state parks, we have stewardship folks. I also work for the Preservation Trust. We have stewardship folks. I think the science is really clear that herbivory is having a huge impact. We've done restoration work on Jones Island, or we've done exclosures. You can see it with your own eyes. Go to Waldron and look at Disney Point, where you have actually young oaks, but you will never see in an unprotected area on these islands. Is hunting a silver bullet? No. But I think that, you know, as the commission, we're responsible to provide great recreational experiences for folks. And I understand the impacts, and I really feel the passion around the idea that these are special places and preserves. But we also have an obligation to the little guys, to the insects, to the birds, to the plants, to the fauna, in addition to the people. So, and then thirdly, this is a partnership opportunity with the tribes. I mean, getting tribal engagement back here in the islands and using traditional ecological knowledge is a great opportunity. We're stronger if we work together.
And this is an opportunity the tribes have embraced, which is, I think, is a great way to begin the process of reconnecting with folks out there. So when I look at this, it just seems like we have partnership opportunities, we have potential ecological benefits, and hunting is an incredible recreational experience. So we provide a recreational experience on preserves. It's been done on San Juan, it's been done on Lopez already and successfully. So for me, I understand the concerns about safety. I can't say there's no risk in hunting, but I think it's very minimal. I think the ecological benefits are there, so I'm pretty much a hard yes, I guess, on this one. It just makes sense. There's very few times that in management where we have an opportunity to benefit both the environment and provide recreational experiences and create partnerships.
Thank you.
Mary. Yeah, thank you, Peggy. I'm Mary Gropp. I'm a new commissioner on the Land Bank Commission, and fascinating to jump in right here where this issue is coming up. Turtleback is in my neighborhood. I love it that it's a 5-minute drive away from or bike ride, 10-minute bike ride away from my house. I've spent hours and hours and hours up there hiking and just enjoying the peace and the quiet. And so I understand those of you who live in the West Sound area and are appreciating that, and all of us who know it as a special preserve. I've also spent 3 long summers working up there as a field assistant. And as Zoe and others said, I've carried the rebar up, I put the fences up, I've planted lots and lots and lots, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of plugs and little plants that have been eaten by deer. So I really am familiar with that part. I was just up there yesterday checking a whole area, looking at a whole area where there's trees from 2015 that were fenced, and they've grown, and the ones that the fence have been pushed over, oak trees, or the branches are coming out, they're all just chomped up by the deer. So yeah, that impact is real. If you work up there and you're working with plants, the native plants, you know that. And that whole south area was browsed, as I understand, by sheep for a long time. So that was the beginning of the a real impact on the vegetation, and the deer are continuing that. Other things that I do, I'm a birder, and I'm also participating in a state project to monitor our native solitary bees. And the native solitary bees have evolved with the native plants. And so there's all of these impacts, as I think I think Chris and Amy said both. It's not just the deer and the plants and us, it's the whole ecosystem, and there's all kinds of relationships that we don't understand. The safety issue, I've gone up, I think it's interesting, that whole area on the north side that the proposal for hunting has been put out. In my work up there, I've clambered all through those big bluffs, and that's an area that's pretty far away from the trails. I don't remember the setback that they're using, but it's a very steep area. You very soon get away from where people are going to be hiking that little Raven Ridge Road and the road up to it. I think it's a good choice. If we're going to have hunting, I think that's a good choice to have that area as a separate area from the pedestrian walkthrough. I'm undecided. I'll be an undecided person right now because I do see both sides, and I wish I could be there today with you. I really, really appreciate those of you in the community that are stepping up and really with research and thoughtfulness presenting your opinions. I think you've given us as a commission a lot to consider and work with as we make our decision.
Thank you, Mary. Marilyn.
Thanks, Peggy. Thank you, everybody, for some really great comments. I have so much to digest that I'm looking forward to rewatching the whole public hearing. I really appreciate how thoughtful people are being about this issue. And I am an undecided. One of my specific questions for the land bank staff is, in past years on Lopez Hill and on Mount Grant, how many deer have been harvested over what period of time? I'm really curious as to what the actual effect of this hunting season has been, since one of the rationales for it, the main rationale, is to reduce the deer population. I feel like we're missing some information here. Might have some more questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn.
So I'm Anne Marie Shanks and I live on Orcas, and unlike my partner Amy here, I did not grow up in a gun culture. I grew up in the District of Columbia, so the gun culture there was very different. When we bought our home here in 1988, we went to each of the islands and looked at them, and each island really does have a very different personality. So I would say that I'm not surprised that 170 some people have signed a no hunting petition. I'm not surprised that the neighbors around these properties are concerned. I think that this was an honest step forward. It's for a small period of time. I went back and I looked at, like the weapons that were going to be used and how far do they go. And so I felt like, oh, this is just like a little tap in the water. We're just going to see how it works. But I think that each island is very different, and we need to look at, as Marilyn said, there's some other questions out there. I'm curious as to why in 2008, the land bank decided not to have hunting on turtleback. And maybe that was the way it was for all of the land bank properties. I think there are some really interesting questions like Marilyn just asked about how have those other harvests gone on Lopez and Friday on San Juan, and what have we learned from those? Was it significant enough? Some of the older wildlife people that my family's involved with talk about, well, this is kind of awfully upsetting to the population for it to be such a small period of time and the impact of the take, the hunt. So I'm kind of curious as to, is this also an opportunity to look at some other methodologies to see if there's some other things that can be done to explore controlling the population of the deer and, seeing what else can happen here. So I think there's some interesting conversations to go on with the staff.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself before. My name is Tim Clark. I live on Lopez, but I'm an at-large commissioner, so this is in my backyard, more or less. As far as my background, before I retired, I had Peter's job over on Lopez. I was the Lopez Island Preserve steward for 10 years. I came on when Lopez Hill was still DNR property, I believe, and there was a lease. The land bank at that point had the opportunity to allow hunting. And so in 2008, we looked at that. This is kind of deja vu. There were the same sorts of arguments brought up on both sides. We chose to allow hunting. There it was a little easier because DNR had managed the property up until that point, and there had been hunting for a good period of time. Things have changed since then. It was a successful program. I couldn't say enough good about WDFW and their cooperation. They do get some input as to what happens in certain areas, but usually it's by district. So they will tell you how many deer were taken on Orcas, but it's really hard to say how many deer were taken in a particular neighborhood. And Brandon, you may correct me on this. For Lopez, I was dealing with Ruth Milner at the time, and she was great in pulling out data. We were, in general, on Lopez Hill, which is about 400 acres, and hunting, we pushed to one corner, about 80 acres. They were taking 3 to 6 deer a year. from that area, as I recall. There were no problems, but it was a different program. Things have evolved since then. It was pretty much wide open. We asked everybody to register and we talked with each of the hunters before and hopefully after, but that didn't happen very often. But there could be more than 2 hunters in this 80-acre section. Now it's much more tightly controlled. 2 hunters in the entire preserve and registered for certain days. So you know who is there, when they're there, and basically where they are. It's a much better program. I appreciate this. I do have a question. I listened to the last meeting, and one thing that I passed over was that it sounded like WDFW would be working with the land bank staff to make sure the boundaries between hunting and trails were big enough. It's not just a 100-foot setting. So those can change just for safety. So that's another consideration. I also disagree with calling disease a predator. I think of it more like the plague. It's not something you want necessarily. It means that things have gotten out of whack. And also, before Europeans showed up here, there were other predators. They were indigenous people. They managed these places and they managed the deer population. They had it figured out because they had 10,000 years to figure it out. We don't have that time. We haven't done a very good job yet, but we're working on it. So thank you very much for all the comments. It's really good. And really good to see everybody coming out. I appreciate this as much as anything.
Okay, I guess I'll close it up. I'm not decided yet. I'm from Lopez. I was around when there was the deer accident the fatality over on Lopez. And I talked with the deputy right after that, because that was very concerning and traumatizing for all of us. There were 22 hunters right there in the vicinity when that happened. That was not a controlled situation. That was an out of control situation, and it was an accident waiting to happen. And that's what the deputy said, that this was bound to happen because it hasn't been managed very well. That was on BLM land. So on Lopez, we have quite a bit of BLM land, and the hunting is managed totally different over there. But it abuts our properties as well. So it's a challenge that we have over there. I think we've all learned from that situation. And hopefully going forward, we'll be done a little bit better. I have watched I've been part of Lopez for decades. At one point, not that long ago, maybe probably 5 years ago, I looked across at the pasture across the road, there'd be 28 deer there. Now I see maybe 2. But they're coming back. I'm really paying attention, and there were none there for a while. Now there's 2, and then there'll be 5, and they're rebounding as they would do. So, and I deeply care about the ecosystem that we have on this island, and how can we as humans try to coexist so that we are supporting. And that might sound like a contradiction, like coexist, if I'm also talking about, maybe we're talking about hunting. I don't have any personal ethical opposition to hunting at all. I have hunted in the past. Over on San Juan, I learned how to shoot rabbits because there were so dang many of them, and that was the great way to learn how to hunt. And I ate them all. So I have had hunters on my property, and I really appreciated that. They were very responsible, and I also got a little bit of benefit, in return, and I believe in that. But it has to be done right, and people need to know who's around them, what the issues are, the safety issues are. So I don't know where I'm gonna, land on this, but I have really, really appreciated the conversation and all of your comments, pro and con, and questions. I think the questions are equally important. So this will be continued. And thank you. And please continue to participate.
You want to go into a break now, Peggy?
Yeah, so we are gonna take we're a little late, so we'll take maybe a 10-minute. So we'll come back at
10:20.
10:20. Thank you. Okay. So I've been informed our next thing on our agenda, it was going to be a report from Justin Paulson, council member. And he is unable to attend. He was hoping to attend by phone, but that's not possible. Right. So, now we're gonna move on to the Edwards, who's gonna do the update from the San Juan Preservation Trust. And as you all know, the Preservation Trust is a really important partner for the land bank.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Peggy. And we definitely appreciate our partnership with the Conservation Land Bank and are able to accomplish so much more together. As Chris had mentioned during his comments earlier, we are better together. And so we greatly appreciate this partnership with you all in continuing forward. And I have some fantastic news to share in that on March 31st, the San Juan Preservation Trust acquired the Mount Ben West Preserve on the west side of San Juan Island. We are overjoyed in being able to take ownership of this really critical 30-acre parcel that connects in with the San Juan Conservation Land Bank's West Side Preserve and also connects with the Mount Ben complex. So we're excited to move that forward. The first phase is now complete, thanks to many, many of you who helped us get to this point and being able to accomplish such a significant conservation outcome. But we have so much more work to do, of course. This is just the beginning. And we recently signed a cooperative agreement with the land bank to grant later this year a conservation easement to the land bank on the Mount Ben West Preserve. We're excited to move that forward and are really appreciative of all of the efforts to get us to this point thus far. That includes the prosecuting attorney's office working with Amy and John and Lincoln, of course, as well, with our outside legal counsel, Alice Jones, to be able to finalize that agreement. And with that, there's a lot that's ahead of us, as I've mentioned, and that we're excited to be able to share this preserve with the public eventually. But we have to go through a lot in making sure that the property is safe for access. We will be working closely with the land bank over the next year on the conservation easement, which would include and will include a public trail access opportunity from the West Side Preserve to the SJPT Mount Ben Preserve. So lots to look forward to, but it's going to take us a lot of time so that access will not be available until sometime in 2028. But we will keep you all updated. And we look forward to sharing this amazing conservation success with you all more broadly. And then other items that I'd love to share with you all is that that we did attend the terrestrial managers group with many of you. And we really want to thank Erin for all of her work and efforts in being able to pull that together for all of the agencies, entities, and stewardship and tribal entities within the islands. And so just thank you so much, Erin, and all of those other folks involved in being able to have such an informative meeting. Those connections go well beyond that time together and are even more critical, I think, than what folks learn specifically at those meetings. So creating those connections, we just value your time and being able to set up a successful meeting. I'd also like to share with you all that on this call right now, we have our communications and outreach manager, Charlotte Chevalier. She's waving to you all now. Charlotte, you'll be seeing her at some of our meetings in the future. to be able to help enhance our communications and outreach with the San Juan County Conservation Land Bank. And so we're looping her in and helping to foster that relationship, expand it even more. And we look forward to collaborating with you all as a partner even more in the future. So thank you all.
Peggy, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi, Charlotte, I wondered if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Sorry if you did this earlier. And I'm also just curious, are you related to Marty? Is that your dad?
I'm Charlotte Chevalier, and Marty Chevalier is my father-in-law. I'm married to Curtis Chevalier, who, there's the four siblings, but I'm the communications and outreach manager over at the Preservation Trust, and today is actually my year, so I've been there for a year, and I look forward to seeing you all more in person, at least at next land bank meeting next month. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Okay. Thanks, Vicki. And really, really, really good news about Met Bend. Some of us had a chance to go up there some time ago, and it is beautiful. It is exquisitely beautiful. One of the biggest oaks, or some of the biggest oaks I've ever seen. So good work on that. And then I'm looking forward to our part in it coming up. Next is Aaron doing the financial report.
I'll pull it up here. Yeah, they're a little bit further away than normal, so are you guys able to make that out to some degree? I'll zoom in a little bit and I can move around. So this is the end of the first quarter financial statement review. We do a much more elaborate budget analysis and discussion when we do amendments and then at the annual budget, but for on a quarterly basis, we really try and stick to just highlights and cash flow updates for the first quarter. First thing we're going to look at here is the balance sheet and cash flows comparative to where we ended 2025. As you can see, for cash, combined cash for the Conservation Area Fund and the Stewardship Fund, as well as the endowment, it's around 14.4 million. That increased by the end of Q1, end of March, to 16.6. This is largely due to a donation in the Conservation Area Fund for the Dalton Bay Road property. So that's why you see the significant increase in cash for the Conservation Area Fund. We didn't add anything to the endowment in the first quarter. Typically, that will happen as we start to spend more money and move money over on a quarterly basis from the Conservation Area Fund to the Stewardship Fund. We'll move some money in there. But for right now, at the end of March, we have a $2.2 million increase to 16.6 million combined. Assets, we carry the donation from the Land Bank Renewal Committee for volunteer purposes. So we are working on some plans to start to spend some of those funds here in this year. And we also have the real property total value of land bank property that we have that is done on an annual basis, and its taxable value. Lincoln usually works on that. And when we have that updated, I will update that balance there in the 2026 year column. Liabilities, long-term debt. All we have at this point that we carry are just bond debts. 3 of the 4 will be paid off at the end of this year, and we will be only carrying forward, it's called the Conservation Futures Bond, which is what we use to purchase turtleback years ago, so that will be our only bond continuing through 2036. The other bonds will be paid off in final at the end of 2026. So we will see there's 2 annual distributions to the long-term debt throughout the year, and I will make note of those for you all when those happen. Moving down to highlights for revenues and expenditures for both funds. We have our primary revenue source, which is the 1% real estate excise tax. First quarter turned out to be pretty strong at 872,000. I have this little chart off to the side where you can see how it compares to the previous 3 years. Pretty strong. This was one sale that really sent us over the edge here on Orcas, $23 million property sale. So that really helps, you know, in a time when you can't really predict what's going to happen with sales and the economy here in the county, but it always helps out when we get off to a good start. Primarily, the bulk, 50% of our REIT revenue is collected in the third quarter. So when we can have strong quarters outside of that, it helps, you know, carry the load, and we continue to monitor this. You know, it's really early, so we won't make any changes on additional spendings or cutting back. Sometimes we won't do that this early in the year. We tend to wait till much further on before we make any budgetary changes, and if we do that, we would do it in the second and third for the second and third amendment of the county budget if we do something like that. Yes.
If we had not had that large Orcas purchase, where would we have been?
We would be right around the 2025 and 2024 range. It was a $230,000 day and contribution to taxes. So, but that's what we're seeing. That's been the trend ever since, you know, 2023 is we've been much more reliant on big sales popping up as opposed to quantity of sales. So that trend still continues. So back to other taxes, that's really a combination of conservation futures, which makes up the bulk of that 52,000. The other ones are really small leasehold taxes and sales tax from the nursery and things like that. So that looks good. LGIP interest, we did make the adjustment in the budget to account for the significant increase in the federal funds rate, which is what the LGIP interest rate really tracks. So anyone that, you know, follows the Fed, and when they make interest rate changes, the LGIP rate really tightly aligns with that. And that's one of the things that I do monitor is how the Fed board is projecting rate increases or decreases throughout the year and what the expectations are, and we budget based on that. So still coming in pretty high. That's a good number for the land bank. 36% of what's budgeted. That's great. Conservation futures. That was a well easement that we sold here on Orcas Island. Donations, as I mentioned, 1.8 million. This was not an expected donation when we budgeted. Very generous donation to help cover our expenses and our costs for the Dolphin Bay Road acquisition. Grant revenue. This is primarily grant revenue from the Beaverton Trail project reimbursements. We did close out some other grants, including Wapmau Edition. That grant is closed out now. billings for that are done, and we have a few other grants that we are closing up and should see some other revenues come in for grant revenue. But throughout the year, the primary grant revenue that we will receive is reimbursement from the Beaverton Trail project. We'll look at expenditures. This is Q1, so very early. We just look at making sure that things are tracking with the budget, and they are. Conservation Area Fund is separate from the Stewardship Fund. Wages and operations for stewardship will typically include some additional expenses, liability insurance. That was one of the main topics discussed for county increases that we have to pay and that are divvied up equally amongst all departments. That was a one-time budget expense paid in the first quarter, so we won't see that increase. Fleet came down because they decided they were going to look at their business model and not impose additional surcharges to bring their cash balances up. So that leveled off. IT costs are built into there as well, which are around $20,000 a year. So you kind of see where some of that, those additional costs early in the first quarter, where you see, wages and operations being pretty high off the bat. You pay a lot of that up front in the first quarter with the county. So that's where it's captured. Acquisition costs, that is just operations, a little bit of wage attached to that, as well as grants and acquisitions where we are looking to do where we have appraisals for properties and things like that. So there's a few that are in there. And then property management and maintenance costs from stewardship. The bulk of that, honestly, in the first quarter, we typically are pretty low. That's a high number for first quarter, but again, that's all tied to professional services and our Bowman Exceltech consultants working on the Beaverton Trail project. So there's a lot of reimbursement from grant revenue that is attached to that first quarter property management and maintenance line right there. As per usual, nothing for debt payments or site enhancement this early in the year. This is where we do a lot of planning and setup for a lot of those projects to take place later on in the year when things dry up. So that is our first quarter report. There are any questions?
I appreciate the footnotes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
There's a question.
How much do we still owe on Turtleback? That's the only long-term bond that hasn't been paid off.
The exact number, yeah, I couldn't give you. Let me see.
Just a minute, no.
Yeah, I don't want to spout off us the wrong.
If that's the only long-term bond that we have.
But it's probably about 2 or 3 million, probably about $2 million, $2 million.
Million down.
Yeah, about $2 million left on that, based on what our long-term debt is with 2.725, about $2 million.
Oh, yeah, we're 80% paid
Yeah,
off on that.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Erin.
Pretty good, Aaron, off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a second to kick in.
So now we're moving into Lincoln's report.
All right, I don't have a whole lot for you today, but I did want to talk about tribal relations. Amy have already mentioned that we now have a tribal relations subcommittee. of the commission. We've also talked about this at our stewardship leadership team. We have a committee working on policy and permissions. That's not the right word, basically, but we're looking at, you know, how we frame our interactions with tribes and how we're working to increase those interactions constructively. And it's a step-by-step process. This is an incremental thing, dealing with tribes, just how it is. We're still getting to know each other and learning about each other, and that's the important thing. And each step takes us a little bit further down that road. So we do have, I am working on a draft policy, and again, that happens within the county's tribal framework. So we'll be working with Frankie Robertson, who is on the phone. I see, I know she's in transit. She's the county's tribal liaison officer. So we're working closely with her and working on this policy. We've got a list now compiled, well, draft compiled of both our, just a summary of our engagement to date. So I'll be sharing this with the commission at some point in the not too distant future, and also our an outreach and education summary. So we're pulling together all of the information on what we've been doing with tribes and trying to map out what we're doing as we go forward. Work in progress. So that's what I have. I will go on to talk a little bit about the Beaverton Marsh Trail project. So moving into stewardship. Rachel Dietzman, who's our project manager, is not here today. But what I can report to you is cautious optimism. We're moving into next week. We'll be getting the 60% design information from the consultant. So that's going to tell us a lot more about how the project is shaping up, what the costs look like, and we'll see how that goes. But as you all know, we're on a very tight timeline, having to get to the ability to have DOT sign off on that by the end of August, basically, so that we can go out for bid on actual construction of the trail project. For those of you who don't know, we're making use of a federal allocation that was made originally for a different kind of trail, but was modified to just work on the Beaverton Preserve, which was great for us because that preserve on San Juan Island is really in two pieces. There's a marsh in between, and crossing that marsh is something that we wanted to do for quite a while, and we know going to be very expensive. So having that federal money really will prove quite helpful in that process. I did also want to answer Bob's question about the Cascade Creek grants. Unfortunately, we did get a grant to purchase water rights to preserve in-stream flow in Cascade Creek. We carried that forward as much as we could, but we have not been able to come to agreement with the Rosario folks. Sorry. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what people are telling me. There's lots of hand signaling. Like,
Oh, I was just gonna ask him a question. I'm sorry.
We haven't been able to come to agreement. The grant period has run out, so that money is going away. If we're able to resurrect that going forward, we'll see. But it's not, unfortunately, that's not good news. Truthful. Questions? Yes.
I just heard the word Rosario. And that's where I live, so I don't know what you were talking about just now about Gross area, you're trying
It refers to the water rights that the corporate entity still retains. And we were hoping to purchase a portion of those water rights to ensure more flow going down Cascade Creek, which goes through our Coho Preserve, which is really the only salmon spawning stream we have in the county. It's only at that very lower reach portion. We always have concerns about wanting to maintain water flow through there, particularly in the fall season.
to, thank you.
I just offer one little comment here. I'm working on a story for the press on this topic with Sandy, who you heard from earlier. And without revealing anything that, you're not gonna read about in the press, this is a live issue. And, other sources to buy out Rosario other than through the land bank are being looked for. And negotiations, are not pending, but there's a definite, open door. To speak, with, Bartos. And the prospects of a unified Rosario corporate entity coming back are so slim that it's changed the equation.
Okay, I was curious on Rosario, is there water usage primarily for like the downhill housing and mansion area, or is it at all related to the water facility kind of more up the hill by the fire station?
I'm the wrong person to ask about the various facilities, but their water rights are for two purposes. Obviously, there's the drinking water purpose, but there's also a hydropower water right. So we were looking to get a portion of those to direct to the street.
Bob,
So, yeah, it's a hydroelectric, water right, that's a transfer, there's a ditch that takes water from Cascade Creek on the exit of Moran State Park and dumps it into Cascade Lake and goes through the dam down to the cross stop. This is probably a bit out of left field, but I'm known for that. I'd like the commission to consider the purchase of that water right in total. And I know that there's, it's a big ask, but I think that there's a terrible thing going on here as far as that water right being tied to Rosario, and the resort doesn't really do anything for the resort other than hydroelectric. And one of the key problems there in that water right is it comes with the responsibility of the dam. And the responsibility of the dam is huge in that, in the meetings that I've been involved with, that's where everybody kind of took a step back, and it's sort of like, well, this becomes a much bigger animal as far as who's responsible for that dam and what it would mean for that dam to not be maintained and kept up, both for the community, the state, state parks. The list just goes on and on. So I know that's a big ask, and yet it seems like it's worthy of considering in some form or fashion. And I'll just leave it at that.
We could certainly bring that back to the commission for future conversation.
Strengthening your hand, is the reality that the, 1972 court-driven adjudication of water rights by the State Department of Commerce, which did not include consideration of the 1855 treaty, essentially allocated water to Olga and Dobay and Rosario and some individuals along the creek there. That's way more water than flows down the creek. So they're backed into a corner. This is Sandy's project, and everybody's totally backed into a corner in that there's more rights allocated than flow down the creek, and something's got to give. And frankly, the pin the, you know, what do you call it, keystone to this whole thing is Rosario, because they own the top 3 feet or something of the lake, so. So there's something's gonna change here pretty soon.
Well, I'll jump in there. It's not Rosario anymore.
Well,
It's
correct,
not, it's
it's Bartow.
that, yeah, it's a private entity that owns that, and so, it really has nothing to do with Rosario. He wanted to sell it as part of that, but it didn't happen.
That's never gonna happen, never gonna happen, because Rosario as an entity is gone. And it was Bartow's lawyers that were advising him to preserve the rights for some future buyer. That is now that's kind of a non-issue now, so that the whole thing.
I'm sure we could, have a long conversation, but.
They're very lively, yeah, they're very lively.
Have to move on.
Yes, and I was just reminded that, we need to move on. So, at this point, we are gonna move into an executive session.
Well, we've got, I think, a couple of minutes, so if there are any more stewardship things, or Tanya wants to talk about outreach. We've got 2 minutes to do that.
Bob raised a question also about fire burning in the beginning, in your public comment. Did you ask about?
Fire?
No, okay.
No, it was, what he asked about was the, transaction between Orcas Island Parks and Rec.
Oh.
And our Crescent Beach Reserve. We're still working on that. I have that queued up at the prosecuting attorney's office.
Nice.
Still moving forward.
We'll be signing soon.
Okay, any other stewardship updates? Quick stewardship updates. No,
Doug raised,
but Doug, you don't have your hand up. Do you have?
That
a
was
comment?
that was a wave of nope. I'll abstain. We don't have time, and there's nothing critical.
Nancy Greenhouse is doing it.
Oh, okay, that's.
That's Tanya's
That's just
cursor.
Ah.
A good eye.
Okay, Doug, because we only have a few more.
No.
Sorry.
So now we can go.
Okay, so we are going to move into executive session to discuss the acquisition or sale of real estate funds for RCW 4230-11-1B. And
So
that
this
is-
closes the public part of the meeting.
Yes, and thank you so much for showing up. We're coming out of executive session. We have not made any decisions, and we are not making a decision right now. So, and this is the end of our meeting, so thanks, everyone.
Thank you.